Look, all fiction is based on some truth, right? What does Miss Berg teach us in English 101? Write what you know.
Well, you want to learn something?
Do you want to know?
I want to know why.
I want to know.
Spielberg, Lucas, Sonnenfeld.
What do you know and what do you don't know?
They're getting at us through the fiction.
The notion is the arts and sciences come together, and to be fully educated and fully alive, you need an appreciation for both.
Good evening. Welcome to tonight's presentation of Science on Screen.
The Sloan Foundation has a nationwide program to encourage leading artists in film, television, and theater to create more realistic and compelling stories about science and technology.
You take hydrogen, you add oxygen, you burn.
Of course, machines can't think as people do.
You stole this. How do you feel about that?
And we had been trying to expand this notion of science and to show that it was actually, could be entertaining, could be fun. And then the Coolidge came along with this wonderful idea of something called Science on Screen, where they took the notion of science but really democratized it, and by bringing in expert scientists, engineers, technologists, they were able to take any subject. The one that always sticks in my mind is Night of the Living Dead, the role of the amygdala. So you could just take the silliest fun movie, bring in someone who's knowledgeable, and focus on a certain piece of that story, and it would be a great learning opportunity, and also could be a lot of fun.
I learned lexicology is really complex now with the internet.
The accepted vulgarism for a smackaroo is $1.
She discussed the peptides of love and pheromones.
Molto pericoloso.
The same thing that goes on in baboons, and how there's an alpha male baboon that rises to power.
So we started our relationship in 2010, and I think now we're up to 57 theaters across the country, from Alaska to Minnesota to Florida to California. It's growing all the time, and as we see science is more and more popular. The last 2 years, the film The Martian, over $750 million at the box office. Yes! Hidden Figures, which has been the top of the box office. They really show that science and technology can be the stuff of your local cinema that everybody wants to go see.
Do you know what this means?
I saw the movie in a whole different light because I've seen the movie before.
Science being part of a comedy was fantastic. It's a brilliant idea.
Well, the Science on Screen series, I think, is absolutely wonderful. And I have learned a lot of things that I never knew.
Hello, welcome to Science on Screen at Film Streams in Omaha, Nebraska. Science on Screen is an initiative of the Coolidge Corner Theater in partnership with the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. For the past 5 years, Science on Screen grantee theaters have chosen one night of the year to simultaneously host Science on Screen events, creating a coast-to-coast offering of thought-provoking programs that pair film screenings with explorations of science, technology, and medicine. We call this night the National Evening of Science on Screen, and Film Streams is so honored to be a part of it. We'll be partnering with folks from UNMC to chat about the film TEKNOLUST. TEKNOLUST is a 2002 film written, produced, and directed by Lynn Hirschman-Leeson, starring Tilda Swinton and Jeremy Davies. Anxious to use artificially intelligent robots to improve the world, Rosetta Stone, played by Tilda Swinton, a bio-geneticist, devises a recipe through which she can download her own DNA into a live brew she is growing in her computer. Our scholars will be in conversation about interesting quirks from the movie, parthenogenesis, modern genetic technologies, and ethical questions of genetics. Get ready for a wild ride with our program, TEKNOLUST. Clones are people too.
All right, everyone, hello. Welcome to Science on Screen. My name is Kacie Baum. I am the Senior Manager of Events and Community Engagement at UNMC.
My name is Safwan, and I'm an MD PhD student at UNMC.
And today we're going to talk about TEKNOLUST. Before we start, we're just going to let you know we are going to spoil the ending and spoil the whole movie. So if you want to come back, circle back with us in a little bit. But otherwise, we'll just kind of start with a brief quick recap of what the movie is just about. Maybe just like a synopsis. Like, how would you, in 2 sentences, what is this movie about?
I feel like it's really about someone who's cloning themselves, but I'm also going to be a romantic and say it is. I feel like it is about love and sex, right? I mean, the name TEKNOLUST, or lust, I guess. Maybe not love. Maybe it's about love.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say this is a story, a romantic comedy set in the world of technology and cloning.
Yeah.
So that's not really a good description of the movie. Like, if you told me to see that, I would be like, no.
But I do love about the movie that it's, like, I feel like a lot of movies that have technology is like the enemy, and it has this sad ending, and it's dystopian. But in this, it's a pretty, we can talk, but it's like a happy ending.
Yeah, I mean, it's legit a romantic comedy in its core, I think, with all these other things in the background. Okay, so before we even really get into anything, let's just talk about a few of the quirks we found in the movie. So if you want to shout one out.
One of the first things I noticed was that I really liked was the orchids. I don't know if you saw it. Like, they kept, when you were in Rosetta Stone's apartment, you kept seeing the orchids, which I was really interested in because I have orchids and they die. Well, I have them, they die, I buy more, it goes on and on. But the movie is a lot about like reproduction and sexual reproduction versus asexual reproduction. And orchids are really interesting because, if I start lecturing, you can stop.
No, but I know you're going with this, though. I know where you're going.
But orchids really have this interesting reproduction where they've somehow figured out a way to have to release pheromones that bees produce. So bees essentially come up to these orchids and try to have sex with them, and then that's how they spread the pollen. Or alternatively, if there are no bees or other things around, the orchids can have sex with themselves. So it's pretty, I think it's interesting. And then, of course, orchids are also, I think, a lot of times associated with women and being like I can't remember the word. It's the opposite of phallic.
No, just say it. It's like a vagina.
The word itself makes some men uncomfortable. Vagina.
Oh, yeah?
Let's talk about cloning in general, because that is basically what this movie is about. This woman, Rosetta Stone. Again, don't look too deep into the meaning of the name. It has nothing to do with language learning. Both of us were really looking hard for that and just found nothing. She clones basically herself. Apparently, backstory, her family dies in this horrific accident.
Yeah, that was a dark part.
It was super dark that they just showed with newspaper clips and mentioned one time, and it's like, well, okay.
Yeah.
So she cloned basically herself.
Yeah.
And they are living, breathing, alternative people. I don't know, clones. I just call it that. Alternative people. New term.
And I mean, it's sort of just like this idea, like we could clone people, and it's like she clones them sort of like because she can, I guess. Yeah. I guess
they never really.
Family,
right? I think it's
Yeah.
because she wants family. They don't really like explain it, but I think it's like hinted.
Yeah.
Again, this whole movie is like literally, I think, deep down to its core about love and everyone wanting to be loved.
Yeah.
And so she, missed her family. She has these people that she cares for, and they love her. She loves them.
Yeah.
I mean, they bring that up constantly, even when the clones want to break out and be free and not be in the. Be stuck at their little spots. They're like, she doesn't love us anymore. They're like, no, she's so good to us. She loves us so much. I mean, that's all they want. They love each other, and there's a good, nice theme through all of it.
Positive take on the
movie. There was a lot of negative takes we had to, but we'll keep it good. Well, and is that something? I mean, another, theme we can kind of hit on here is, can you go in, if you clone someone, and edit their genes, or get in there, like you have these old cells, maybe this one is mutating because you got someone who is prone to cancer in their family. Like, can you go in there and try to take the cancer cell out? This is me trying to be really scientific here for you.
You're right.
Do you understand what I'm trying to ask? Okay.
Yeah, that's why I feel like the fact that this movie was 20 years ago, that's what makes it surprising, because now we're sort of, I think, I don't want to say looking over a cliff, but we're looking into when we have these new technologies like CRISPR, which we can talk about, where you can really be pretty accurate when you edit genes. And we've sort of tried to not have people do that in germ cells, but people are certainly trying it in humans to get rid of cancers, to cure weird things. I don't know, I'm going back to the eye, and really edit people's genes. But I think doing that on embryos or something that's going to become a human is where I think most people should be sort of ethically, you start to get uncomfortable. But yeah, it is weird to think that this movie is old enough where this all seemed like sort of sci-fi, but now it's you could do this now. You wouldn't want to, and it might not
Right.
work, and you'd end up with really bad effects. But you could we have the technology to sort of be able to do it.
So we both work at UNMC, and we have this technology called CRISPR. Do you want to explain that to people?
Yes. So CRISPR was something that was sort of stumbled upon. I don't know when, but it was the two scientists, Doudna and Champillier or something, two female scientists just won the Nobel Prize for it this year, actually.
Whoa, whoa.
Yeah, so it's a big thing, but it's basically this technology where you can cut genes in a very accurate way. So before, when we were cutting genes, we were sort of, almost randomly choosing where we could cut. But with CRISPR, that was sort of discovered and something we kind of stole from nature that bacteria had, we can cut bacteria or cut DNA really accurately. So you can imagine you can cut out a gene and put something else in. And then specifically at UNMC, Dr. Guru Murthy has sort of worked to optimize this, and it's called Easy CRISPR, where you can cut using this CRISPR technology, and then you can insert new DNA, and you can insert pretty long sequences, which is sort of unique that now you can take something else, put something new in, and so you can imagine when you're doing that with genes what you can do, sort of, I guess, good and bad, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say that goes back to that ethical question. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Like, great thing if we can cure like HIV.
Yeah.
Bad thing if we can make evil clones, you know?
And it's interesting that you mention HIV because initially and it still is sort of a moratorium that people should not be doing this to sex cells that you would pass on to the children you might have, right? You shouldn't be doing that. But there was a scientist who decided to do this against everyone's recommendation to cure, or essentially to change a gene to make these two, I think they were twins or maybe triplets, basically resistant to like ever getting HIV.
Oh, wow.
We don't know if it worked, but it basically, like, people said, don't do this because we don't know what the sort of downstream effects it could have on these children who now have to live with this choice that the scientist made. And I think he's actually in prison now.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, it was definitely, should not have been doing it, sort of went outside of, I think, what people wanted to be doing. But yeah, HIV specifically was an example where people really saw an avenue for it, but we're still at the level where, like, trying to figure out the safety. And of course, people are maybe a little more cowboyish about it.
Okay.
For good and bad.
Yeah. We could get into like some X-Men bullshit there, right? Like that's what
And I think that's what people's worry. And I think, I think just even genetics, the history of genetics is littered with bad, like, through the entire 20th century, the history of, like, the way people thought about genetics was through eugenics, so in, like, the worst possible way. So I think most scientists who think about that history really were, like, very careful, as we should be, because it's sort of marred by ugliness.
Yeah, that makes sense. So another theme in the movie, and you mentioned it a little bit, you talked about the orchid.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, and the reproduction, so.
I don't think they even know what a pistol is.
I got your pistol right here.
So there is a couple of reproduction themes in this movie. One, the clones, it just kind of is casually mentioned, they can reproduce themselves.
Yeah, they can just keep making more.
Making more of them, which they do, spoiler, at the end. The blue one just kind of goes crazy.
Yeah.
But there's also the red clone, Ruby, at the end, also becomes pregnant.
Yeah.
Like, so she actually mates with a male and does become pregnant. So we have two different kind of like reproduction themes going on in this movie. You want to talk a little bit more about either?
So I think sexual reproduction, I guess it depends on people's high school biology class what they taught.
Right.
But yeah, I think sexual reproduction people are aware of, but the asexual reproduction is sort of what makes this interesting, that they can just make more copies of themselves, and I guess that's what Rosetta Stone does. And it's interesting because the story that I always think of when I think of asexual reproduction is there was this Komodo dragon, I think it was a Komodo dragon, some reptile that was in a zoo, and it was basically housed by itself, and it lived and roamed and did its thing, and then all of a sudden the zookeepers, this Komodo dragon started having babies. And so they're immediately like shocked, what's going on? What are people doing to this Komodo dragon? And then they sort of took these babies, sequenced their genome, and found out they were essentially clones of the mother. And so there are other, like, I mean, bacteria and sort of, I don't want to say lower animals do it.
Those
but it was
low animals.
yeah, more primitive animals do it. But it was an interesting thing where they sort of discovered that, you know, I always think of the corny Jeff Goldblum Life Finds a Way from Jurassic Park, right?
Right.
Yeah, that it's just sort of you kept this Komodo dragon by itself and it figured out a way to make more of itself.
So let's talk about gene therapy failures. Do you know of any that we should talk about? Because that could be something that happens if we start doing all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so like we kind of talked about CRISPR and how that sort of is the new thing, and I think, again, the hesitancy about CRISPR and using it to modify people's genes comes from science failing before. And it was sort of in the, I think, late 90s at the University of Pennsylvania, and they had these great ideas about how we could basically deliver a virus. So if you knew you had a genetic mutation, we figured it out, and it was just one single base pair, so the single little molecule, and we just needed to change it. And we could insert a virus, which we know certain viruses go in and change your DNA.
Right.
So what if we insert this virus and put in a new version of that gene, right?
Okay.
So, of course, in theory, it seems like a great idea.
Yeah, it seems super easy.
Yeah,
like, sign me up.
Yeah, and so they were trying this with basically people who had this disease that caused their liver to fail. And there's some still gray area about basically where they didn't inform this 18-year-old kid really what the risks were. But they basically injected him with this virus, which was supposed to cut out the gene. He got extremely sick because they like messed up the dose of the virus, and so he essentially just got really sick and died. And after that, you can imagine that the National Institute of Health and really just scientists in general were like, we're done with this. And it's really been done with this for like 20 years. And now sort of people are getting back into it where people are using gene therapy, using approaches like CRISPR, and at least from the small sort of few times they've done it, it's worked. So I think that's something promising, but definitely you can see why people would be hesitant. And I think especially including the fact that there's some worry about the scientists not really telling people the truth.
Yeah.
And that's all, I mean, I think if any year, this year has been a good example of how people feel about science and how bad a lot of, including me, scientists are at communicating science. And so I think that really didn't help the image, but hopefully I think with new technology people get better and stuff like this, I guess, what we talk about.
Yeah, I was gonna say science communication, totally off subject, a little random, but like as someone who works in science events who's not a scientist, I love when we can have people like you explain things for an audience that maybe doesn't understand or doesn't want to know, but like in a smart way, giving all the facts in kind of like a non-bullshit way. And I think this is important.
Hopefully this isn't bullshit.
They're gonna cut and paste you, it'll be great. Control Alt Delete, just start you again. So just to kind of wrap it up, again, this movie was not what I expected. One, it was short, so it was fun. It was kind of silly names, silly character choices of whispering. The technology wasn't spooky technology, like taking over the world. In its core, it was really like everyone in this movie just wanted to be loved by someone and something. Also, I would not clone myself, just if anyone wanted to know that. So how about you?
Myself either, I don't think.
There's a possibility then.
No, I mean, I'm imagining if you, like someone who answers affirmative, like, yes, I want to clone yourself, that would immediately make you think like, are you that, like, you think you're that great? There should be more of you? I think one of me is already pushing the limit that this planet needs or wants.
Would you recommend the movie to people?
I would. I think it's a fun movie, and especially if you're a scientist or someone who's really interested in science. It's amazing that it's a movie from 20 years ago, and it's still pretty relevant. I mean, you watch like anything from 20 years ago, and it seems like dated, but it's got some good themes. And honestly, after I started to realize and like not be so serious about it, I was laughing out loud. There's really funny things to it. It just takes that initial like, okay, this is meant to be weird and very, I don't know, just sad. It's like a parody of itself in some way.
I mean, it has Tilda Swinton, so you're guaranteed it's not going to be your average show.
That's a reason enough to watch it.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for joining us for our discussion on TEKNOLUST. We hope you check it out, and also check out Film Streams.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.